Commander Jake Morrison stood in the Grand Hall of Nexus Prime, watching alien beings from across the galaxy gather for what might be humanity's last diplomatic meeting. The massive chamber stretched high above his head, its walls made of a strange blue crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. Hundreds of different species filled the curved seats, each one looking more advanced and powerful than the humans who had only joined this council 5 years ago. Admiral Lisa Patterson adjusted her uniform and whispered to Jake, "Remember, we're here to listen first. Don't let them see how worried we are." Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. They both knew this meeting would decide the fate of Earth and all human colonies scattered across 12 star systems, the Zephyrion. Chancellor rose from his seat at the center of the chamber. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice rang like wind chimes in a storm. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding the Devourer threat. We have studied their advanced patterns and calculated our response. Jake felt his heart sink. The Devourers had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of the galaxy, consuming entire worlds and turning them into more of their kind. Every species that tried to fight them had been completely destroyed. The few survivors spoke of creatures that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or stopped by conventional weapons. The enemy moves toward the core systems, the Chancellor continued. They will reach the outer colonies within 1 year. We have determined that certain worlds must be sacrificed to buy time for proper defenses to be prepared. A low murmur ran through the chamber. Jake noticed that many of the alien delegates were nodding as if this made perfect sense. Admiral Patterson stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Which worlds are you planning to sacrifice?" The Chancellor's crystal form shifted, and Jake could swear he saw something like pity in those alien features. "Earth and its colonies. Also the fringe worlds of the Epsilon sector. The inhabitants of these systems will be relocated to safer regions." "Relocated?" Admiral Patterson's voice rose. "You mean abandoned? You're asking us to leave our homes, our cities, everything we've built?" A new voice spoke from the left side of the chamber. It belonged to a Kronari, one of the tall, gray-skinned species that had been in the galaxy for thousands of years. "Admiral Patterson, your species has been part of this council for only 5 years. Your military contribution is minimal compared to the resources required to defend your worlds. It is simply not practical." Jake watched as other alien delegates began to speak. The sectoid Overmind, speaking through one of its drones, added, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. 12 billion humans and aliens in the outer colonies cannot be valued above the trillions who live in the core systems." Admiral Patterson looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support. "What about the Vanguard? The Traders Guild? Surely some of you understand that we're talking about abandoning entire civilizations." The Vanguard representative, a being that looked like it was made of living metal, spoke slowly. "We sympathize with your position, Admiral. But the mathematics are clear. The Devourers cannot be stopped by conventional means. Strategic withdrawal is the only logical response." Jake stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "You're asking us to run away and leave our people to die. That's not strategic withdrawal, that's cowardice." The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. The Chancellor's crystal form darkened. "Commander Morrison, your species is young and does not understand the realities of galactic warfare. We have seen civilizations rise and fall for millennia. Sometimes survival requires difficult choices." "Maybe," Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "but we're not you. Humans don't abandon their own." Admiral Patterson placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, but she didn't pull him back. Instead, she addressed the council with a voice that carried the weight of her entire species. "We appreciate the council's concern for our welfare, but we will not be relocated. We will not abandon our colonies. If you won't help us defend our worlds, then we'll defend them ourselves." The Chancellor's form brightened with what might have been surprise. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. The Devourers have consumed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Your ships are centuries behind our technology. Your weapons are primitive. Your tactics are untested against this enemy. Then we'll learn, Admiral Patterson replied. We'll adapt. We'll find a way. A laugh echoed through the chamber, coming from the sectoid drone. Admirable sentiment, Admiral. But sentiment does not stop a species that has already consumed 47 worlds. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume everything in their path. Captain Ryan Brooks, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. He commanded the human fleet's flagship, a ship that looked tiny compared to the massive alien vessels surrounding Nexus Prime. Maybe that's true, he said, but we're not asking you to fight our battles. We're just asking you not to actively prevent us from fighting them. The Chancellor turned to address the full council. The human delegation has made their position clear. They choose to remain in the path of the Devourers rather than accept relocation. All in favor of providing military assistance to defend the outer colonies? Jake watched as not a single alien delegate raised their hand or made any gesture of support. The silence stretched on until the Chancellor spoke again. All in favor of providing evacuation assistance to willing refugees from the outer colonies? This time a few hands went up, but not many. The message was clear. Humanity would get minimal help even for those who wanted to leave. The vote is recorded, the Chancellor announced. The outer colonies will receive no military support. Limited evacuation assistance will be provided for those who request it. The Council considers this matter closed. Admiral Patterson nodded slowly. Then we understand each other perfectly. Humanity will defend its worlds alone. As the session ended and alien delegates began to file out, Jake noticed that a few of them looked uncomfortable. The Vanguard representative paused near the human delegation, his metal features unreadable. Admiral, I hope you understand that some of us take no pleasure in this decision. I understand, Admiral Patterson replied. But understanding and agreeing are two different things. Within hours, the first alien ships began leaving the outer sectors. Jake stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching as massive vessels departed for the safety of the core systems. Each ship that left took with it advanced technology, experienced soldiers, and hope for an easy victory. Captain Brooks joined him at the window. Well, Jake, looks like we're really doing this. Looks like it, Jake agreed. Any word from the colonies? All 12 systems report they're staying put? Nobody's asking for evacuation. Governor Martinez on New Texas actually laughed when I asked if they wanted to leave. Brooks shook his head. I don't know if that makes us brave or stupid, maybe both, Jake said, but it makes us human. Admiral Patterson approached them, carrying a datapad with reports from across human space. I've been in contact with our military commanders. They're already drawing up defense plans. Dr. Kevin Martinez thinks he might have found something in the Devourer wreckage from the Kepler incident. What kind of something? Brooks asked. He's not sure yet. But he says their biology is unlike anything we've encountered. There might be weaknesses we can exploit. Admiral Patterson looked out at the departing alien ships. We're going to need every advantage we can find. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In a few months, the Devourers would reach the outer colonies. When they did, they would find humanity waiting for them. Not running, not hiding, but standing ready to fight. The galaxy had abandoned them, but humanity had made its choice. They would stand alone. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council abandoned humanity to face the Devourers alone. Colonel Amy Stevens stood on the command deck of Firebase Alpha, watching streams of refugee ships arrive from the outer rim. Each vessel carried stories of entire worlds consumed, of cities that had simply vanished overnight. Ma'am, we've got another convoy from the Kepler system, reported Lieutenant Nicole Walker, her voice tight with exhaustion. That's the last of them. Kepler 3 is gone. Amy nodded grimly. The Devourers moved like a plague across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. But unlike other species that had simply fled, humans were fighting a different kind of war. They evacuated their people, yes, but they also studied their enemy with every encounter, down in the research labs. Dr. Kevin Martinez bent over microscope displays filled with devourer tissue samples. His team had been working around the clock since the first attacks, trying to understand what they were fighting. The creatures defied every known law of biology, seeming to exist as both individual organisms and parts of a vast collective mind. "Doctor, look at this," said his assistant, Lisa Thompson, pointing to a readout on her screen. "When I exposed the sample to electromagnetic radiation at frequency 847.2, something strange happened." Kevin moved to her station and studied the data. On the screen, the devourer cells that had been pulsing with coordinated activity suddenly began moving randomly, bumping into each other like confused insects. "Run it again," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. "Meanwhile, Commander?" Jake Morrison prepared for what might be the most dangerous mission of his career. Intelligence reports suggested that the Chronari had abandoned a research station in the Vega system, leaving behind advanced power cores that could be crucial to humanity's survival. The problem was that Devourer scouts had already reached the system. "Remember, we get in fast and get out faster," Jake told his team as they suited up in the transport bay. Sergeant Tony Garcia, the team's demolitions expert, was checking his explosive charges for the third time. "If we can get those power cores, Martinez thinks he can build something that might actually hurt these things. And if we can't?" asked Nicole, who had volunteered to pilot the mission despite having no real combat experience. "Then we learn something new about dying," Tony said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "But hey, at least we'll go down swinging." The transport ship slipped through space toward the abandoned Chronari station. It was a massive structure built like a crystal flower with dozens of research pods extending from a central hub. Under normal circumstances, approaching such a station would require diplomatic clearance and formal protocols. Now it was just another piece of salvage in humanity's desperate fight for survival. "Devourer signatures detected," Nicole reported from the pilot's seat. 3 scouts, moving in a standard patrol pattern. Jake studied the scanner displays. The Devourer ships looked like twisted versions of organic matter, all curves and flowing lines that hurt to look at directly. "Can we avoid them?" "Maybe, but it'll take us 40 minutes to reach the station. That's a long time to stay hidden." "Then we don't hide," Jake decided. "We go in fast and loud. Hit them before they can call for help." The transport accelerated toward the station, its weapons systems coming online. The human ship was tiny compared to the Devourer scouts, but it had one advantage: the enemy had never fought humans before. They didn't know what to expect. Nicole brought the ship in at an angle that would have been impossible for most pilots, skimming the edge of the station's hull. The first Devourer scout moved to intercept, its weapons charging with an eerie green light. Jake watched the distance close on his display, waiting for the right moment. "Now!" he shouted. The transport's missiles streaked toward the nearest scout. The Devourer ship tried to dodge, but its movements were too predictable. The missiles struck home, and the alien vessel exploded in a shower of organic debris. The other 2 scouts immediately changed course, moving to surround the human ship. "Get US to the docking bay," Jake ordered. "Tony, you're up." As Nicole guided the ship toward the station's entrance, Tony prepared his charges. The Chronari had built their stations to last, but they hadn't planned for desperate humans with military-grade explosives. The docking bay doors, designed to keep out space pirates and minor threats, stood no chance against Tony's expertise. The explosion echoed through the station as the human team rushed inside. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, and the air tasted of ozone and fear. Jake led the way toward the power core chamber, following blueprints they had stolen from Chronari databases months ago. "Movement ahead," Nicole whispered, raising her weapon. Something was sliding along the ceiling, too fast to be human, but too purposeful to be debris. Jake looked up and saw his first Devourer up close. It was about the size of a large dog, but its body seemed to flow like liquid metal. Dozens of tentacles writhed around what might have been a head, and its eyes glowed with the same green light as their ships. "Contact!" Jake shouted, opening fire. His bullet struck the creature, but instead of falling, it simply absorbed the impacts and kept coming. More shapes appeared in the corridor ahead, moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. "This way," Tony called, blasting a hole through a side wall. The team followed him into a maintenance tunnel. Crawling through the narrow space as alien sounds echoed behind them, they emerged into the power core chamber to find exactly what they had hoped for: 6 chronari power cores, each one capable of generating more energy than a small star. But they also found something they hadn't expected: a single devourer, standing guard over the equipment. This one was different from the scouts they had encountered. It was larger, more complex, with what looked like chronari technology integrated into its body. When it spoke, its voice came from speakers throughout the chamber. "Humans, we have studied your species through the consumption of others. You are ... interesting. Your refusal to flee shows either great courage or great stupidity." Jake kept his weapon trained on the creature, though he wasn't sure bullets would help. "Why don't you come over here and find out which one it is?" The devourer tilted its head, a gesture that was almost human. "Your species fights differently than others. The Zephyrians tried to use superior technology. The chronari relied on their shields and barriers. The sectoids believed their collective intelligence would prevail. All were consumed." "And what makes? You think we'll be any different?" Nicole asked, though her voice shook slightly. "Because you do not fight to win. You fight to learn. Each encounter teaches you something new about us. That is problematic." Tony had been quietly moving around the chamber while the creature talked. Now he was in position behind the power cores, charges ready. He caught Jake's eye and nodded. "Slightly, you're right," Jake said, stepping forward. "We do learn, and here's what we've learned about you." Tony's charges exploded, not to destroy the power cores, but to create a distraction. In the chaos of smoke and debris, the team grabbed what they could carry and ran for their transport. The devourer followed, but its movements seemed slower, less coordinated than before. They made it back to their ship with 4 of the 6 power cores, plus something even more valuable: data recordings of the devourer's behavior under stress. Nicole piloted them away from the station as more enemy ships appeared in the distance. Back on Firebase Alpha, Dr. Martinez examined the power cores with growing excitement. Combined with his electromagnetic research, these devices might be the key to building a weapon that could disrupt the devourer's collective consciousness. "How long do you need?" Colonel Stevens asked. "Give me 2 weeks and I'll have a prototype," Martinez replied. "Give me a month and I'll have something that might actually work." Stevens nodded and turned to address the crowded command center. "All right, people, we've got our chance. Let's see if we can teach these things what happens when you threaten humanity." Outside, the stars still shone with the same light they had for billions of years. But now, for the first time since the Devourers had appeared, that light carried hope. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity had won a battle against the Devourers. Not just survived, not just escaped, but actually won. Most alien species dismissed it as impossible, but a few began to pay attention to the strange. Species that refused to run. Dr. Kevin Martinez stood in his expanded laboratory, surrounded by the prototype devices that would change everything. The resonance array looked simple enough, a collection of metal dishes and crystal components that hummed with barely contained energy. But the mathematics behind it were incredibly complex, requiring precise coordination between multiple devices to create the electromagnetic frequencies that disrupted Devourer communication. "Show me the test results again," said Engineer Lisa Thompson, reviewing the data for the 10th time that morning. She had been working with Martinez for weeks, turning his theoretical discoveries into practical weapons. "The frequency disrupts their hive-mind connection," Martinez explained, pointing to the readouts. "When we hit them with the right pattern, they lose coordination. They start attacking each other or just stop moving entirely." Lisa nodded, but her expression remained worried. "The problem is power. Each array needs massive amounts of energy to work, and the coverage area is limited. We'd need dozens of these things to protect even one star system. Meanwhile, Commander Jake Morrison was learning that fighting the Devourers required completely new tactics. His latest mission had taken him to the ruins of a sectoid colony world, where he discovered something that changed his understanding of the enemy entirely. "They're not just eating planets," he reported to Admiral Lisa Patterson over the communication link. "They're absorbing everything. The knowledge, the memories, the entire history of the species they consume." Admiral Patterson leaned forward at her desk aboard the command ship. "What do you mean?" "I found a Devourer that was using sectoid technology. Not just captured equipment, but actually integrated into its body. It knew things about sectoid military tactics that it could have only learned by consuming their commanders." This revelation sent shockwaves through the human resistance. General Paul Harrison, who had been coordinating guerrilla operations across the occupied systems, immediately changed his strategy. If the Devourers were learning from their victories, then humanity needed to fight in ways that no other species had tried. "We stop using standard military tactics," Harrison announced to his commanders. "No more formation flying, no more predictable assault patterns. From now on, we fight like humans." Captain Ryan Brooks, now promoted to admiral after losing his predecessor in the battle at Kepler, understood exactly what Harrison meant. Other species had tried to fight the Devourers with superior technology and coordinated strategies. Humanity would fight with chaos, creativity, and sheer unpredictability. Pilot Sarah Williams had become the perfect example of this new approach. Her squadron, nicknamed the Hornets, had developed tactics that made no sense to anyone who wasn't human. They would attack from impossible angles, retreat when they should advance, and use their ships in ways that violated every rule of space combat. "Remember," Sarah told her pilots as they prepared for another mission, "if you're thinking like a soldier, you're thinking too much like them. Think like a human. Be unpredictable. Be crazy." The squadron launched from their hidden base in the asteroid field, heading toward a Devourer supply convoy. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their coordination beautiful and terrifying. But that coordination was about to become their weakness. Sarah led the first attack, diving straight toward the largest enemy ship before suddenly spinning away at the last second. The Devourer vessels moved to intercept, but their predictable response patterns left them vulnerable to attacks from unexpected directions. Lieutenant Danny Foster brought his fighter in from below, where no sane pilot would attempt an approach. The Devourers had learned to expect attacks from the sides and front, but humanity's willingness to take impossible risks caught them off guard. "They're trying to adapt," reported pilot Maria Rodriguez over the radio. "But they can't adapt fast. Enough. Every time they figure out one of our moves, we're already doing something else." The battle lasted only minutes, but it was a decisive victory. The Devourer convoy was destroyed, and more importantly, the human pilots had proven that unpredictability was their greatest weapon. The enemy could absorb the knowledge of conquered species, but they couldn't absorb human creativity. Back on Earth, news of these victories was spreading to species that had written humanity off as doomed. The Vanguard, an ancient warrior race that had remained neutral in the conflict, began to take notice. Their representative, a being known only as the Eternal, sent a message to Admiral Patterson. "We have observed your species' methods with interest," the message said. "Your approach to warfare is ... unconventional. Perhaps we were too hasty in our assessment." Admiral Patterson read the message with growing hope. The Vanguard had stayed out of the conflict because they believed resistance was futile. But if they were beginning to change their minds, it might mean other species would follow. The breakthrough came when Dr. Martinez successfully tested his resonance array on a larger scale. The device had been installed on a space station in the Tau Ceti system, just as a Devourer fleet arrived to consume the remaining human colonies. "All ships, this is Firebase Tau Ceti," came the transmission. "Resonance array is online. Prepare for something you've never seen before." The Devourer fleet approached in their usual coordinated formation, thousands of ships moving as one massive organism. But as they entered the array's range, something incredible happened. The perfect coordination dissolved into chaos. Ships began firing on each other, crashing into asteroids or simply drifting aimlessly through space. "It's working!" shouted Lieutenant Nicole Walker from her position on the firebase. "They're completely disoriented. They can't coordinate their attacks." The human defenders, led by Colonel Amy Stevens, seized the opportunity. For the first time in the war, they weren't fighting a desperate holding action. They were winning, but victory came with a price. The resonance array required enormous amounts of energy to operate, and the human ships were running low on power. They had minutes, maybe less, before the system would shut down and the Devourers would recover. "All units, press the attack," Colonel Stevens ordered. "We may never get another chance like this." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships dove through clouds of confused Devourer vessels, their weapons finding targets that couldn't fight back effectively. The enemy's greatest strength, their collective intelligence, had become their greatest weakness. When the resonance array finally powered down, 2/3 of the Devourer fleet had been destroyed. The survivors retreated in disorder, their formation broken and their coordination shattered. It was the first major defeat the Devourers had suffered in their advance across the galaxy. News of the victory at Tau Ceti spread instantly across civilized space. Species that had fled to the galactic core began to whisper among themselves. The humans had done the impossible. They had found a way to hurt the Devours. In the depths of space, other forces began to take notice. The Traders Guild, led by their human contact Rachel Stone, started quietly supplying humanity with advanced materials. Even some of the younger members of the species that had abandoned Earth began to question their leaders' decisions. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last of the Devourer ships disappear into hyperspace. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to hope. They had proven that the enemy could be beaten. Now they needed to prove that humanity's way of fighting could save not just their own species, but the entire galaxy. The tide of war was turning, but the greatest battles still lay ahead. The Devourers would adapt, learn from their defeat, and return stronger than before, but humanity would be ready for them. They would stand together, fight together, and if necessary, die together. Because that was what humans did. They never abandoned their own. The victory at Tau Ceti changed everything. Within days of the battle, Admiral Lisa Patterson received her first official communication from an alien government since the Council had abandoned humanity. The message came from the Vanguard homeworld, and its contents surprised everyone in the human command structure. "Admiral Patterson," the message began, "we request permission to send a diplomatic mission to discuss mutual cooperation against the Devourer threat. The Vanguard Council has voted to reconsider our position." Officer Ben Carter, humanity's newest diplomatic liaison, read the message 3 times before he believed it. The Vanguard were legendary warriors, a species that had fought in galactic conflicts for over 10,000 years. If they wanted to talk, it meant humanity had proven something important. "They're not coming to surrender," Admiral Patterson told her staff. "They're coming to see if we're worth fighting alongside." The Vanguard ship arrived at the human fleet base 2 days later. It was a massive vessel built like a sword made of black metal and flowing energy. When the Vanguard representative materialized on the command deck, every human present felt the weight of ancient power. The being called itself Warmaster Kemph. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in what looked like living armor that shifted and moved with each breath. Its eyes glowed with a soft blue light, and when it spoke, its voice carried the authority of countless battles. "Humans," Kemph said, looking around the room with obvious interest. "We have studied your battles. Your methods are unusual." "Unusual how?" asked Commander Jake Morrison, who had been called back from his latest mission to attend the meeting. "You fight as if you expect to lose, but refuse to accept defeat. Your tactics make no logical sense, yet they achieve results that perfect. Strategy cannot? This interests us greatly." Admiral Patterson stepped forward. "We fight to protect our people. Everything else is just details." Kent's armored head tilted slightly. Yes, this is what we have observed. Other species fight to minimize losses. You fight to maximize damage to your enemy, regardless of cost to yourselves. It is both admirable and terrifying. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in diplomatic history. Traditional alliance talks involved careful discussion of resources, territory, and mutual benefit. But the Vanguard were interested in something different. They wanted to learn how humans thought. Your pilots, Kent explained to Sarah Williams, who had been brought in to demonstrate human tactics. They perform maneuvers that should result in their deaths. Yet they survive. How is this possible? Sarah grinned, the expression looking strange on her battle-worn face. We don't think about dying, we think about winning. Sometimes that makes all the difference. To prove her point, Sarah took Kent on a flight simulation. The Vanguard warrior, despite thousands of years of combat experience, watched in amazement as Sarah's fighter performed impossible movements, threading between enemy ships in ways that violated every rule of physics and common sense. This should not work, Kent muttered as they completed the simulation. Maybe not, Sarah agreed. But it does work. That's all that matters. While the humans and Vanguard learned to work together, other changes were happening across the galaxy. The Traders Guild, led by their human contact Rachel Stone, began secretly supplying humanity with advanced materials and technology. Rachel had been working with the Guild for months, convincing them that supporting humanity was good business. The Devourers don't trade, she explained to the Guild masters. They just consume. If they win, there won't be any markets left to sell to. The Guild support came in small packages at first. Advanced metals for ship construction, power cells for the resonance arrays, medical supplies for the refugee camps. But as human victories mounted, the support grew bolder. Dr. Kevin Martinez found himself working with alien technology that was centuries ahead of human science. The Guild provided him with power sources that made his resonance arrays 10 times more effective, and computational systems that could coordinate dozens of arrays across multiple star systems. We can build a network, Martinez explained to his expanded team. Resonance arrays linked together, covering entire sectors. The Devourers won't be able to coordinate anywhere near human space. Engineer Lisa Thompson was less optimistic. The power requirements are enormous. We'd need the industrial output of 20 worlds just to build the equipment. And then we'll get 20 worlds, Martinez replied, or we'll build them ourselves. Meanwhile, Commander Morrison was leading joint missions with Vanguard warriors for the first time. The experience was eye-opening for both species. The Vanguard fought with precision and discipline that came from millennia of warfare. Humans fought with creativity and stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds. Your demolitions expert observed. Vanguard Battlemaster Yen, watching Sergeant Tony Garcia prepare charges for their latest mission. He appears to be using 3 times the necessary explosive force. Probably, Morrison agreed. Tony likes to be sure. They were infiltrating a Devourer research facility that had been built from the remains of a consumed Chronari science station. Intelligence suggested the enemy was studying the technology they had absorbed, trying to understand why the resonance arrays work so effectively against them. The facility was heavily defended, surrounded by patrol ships and automated defenses. A conventional assault would be suicide. But Morrison and his team didn't plan a conventional assault. We go in from below, Morrison explained to the mixed human Vanguard strike team. The Devourers always defend against attacks from space. They don't expect anyone to be crazy enough to approach through a planetary atmosphere. Battlemaster Yen's expression was unreadable behind his helmet. Commander, the atmospheric approach has a 73% chance of mission failure. Sounds about right for a human plan, Morrison replied. The question is, are you with us? The mission launched from the surface of a nearby moon, using a captured Devourer transport ship that Garcia had enthusiastically modified with human weapons and Vanguard shields. The ship plunged through the planet's atmosphere at speeds that should have torn it apart. But Garcia's modifications held. They reached the facility just as the Devourers were beginning to adapt their tactics based on captured human technology. The timing couldn't have been more critical. "Multiple targets," reported Lieutenant Nicole Walker from the pilot's seat. "Looks like they're running experiments on resonance array components." The strike team hit the facility with a coordinated assault that combined Vanguard precision with human unpredictability. While the aliens provided covering fire with mathematical accuracy, the humans improvised their way through defenses that should have been impregnable. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, working alongside a Vanguard tech specialist, managed to download the facility's research data before Garcia's charges reduced the entire complex to rubble. The information they recovered would prove crucial in the battles to come, but the most important discovery came from an unexpected source as they evacuated the facility. They encountered a group of young aliens who had been secretly supporting the human war effort. They were mostly junior members of species that had officially abandoned humanity, but they had been watching the human broadcasts and learning about human values. "We cannot speak for our governments," explained a young Zephyrian named Crystal Singer of Hope. "But many of us believe that abandoning Earth was wrong. We want to help." Admiral Patterson found herself facing a new challenge, managing a growing coalition of species that officially opposed each other but were united in their determination to stop the Devourers. The young aliens brought with them knowledge of their species' technology and tactics, but more importantly, they brought hope. "This is what we've been fighting for," Patterson told her senior staff. "Not just to save humanity, but to prove that different species can work together. That we don't have to abandon each other when things get difficult." The coalition grew stronger each day. Vanguard warriors trained alongside human pilots. Trader. Guild supply ships delivered materials to secret bases. Young aliens from a dozen species worked in human research facilities, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded by their governments for centuries, but the Devourers were adapting too. Intelligence reports showed that they were changing their tactics, learning from each defeat. The easy victories were over. The real war was about to begin. The emergency transmission reached Admiral Lisa Patterson at 0300 hours, jolting her awake in her quarters aboard the flagship. The message was from the Galactic Council, and the desperation in the alien voices was unmistakable. "Admiral Patterson, this is Chancellor Zephy's of the Galactic Council. The Devourers have broken through our core defenses. Harmony Station is under direct assault. We request immediate assistance from human forces." Patterson sat in stunned silence for a moment. The same council that had abandoned humanity to die was now begging for help. The core worlds, which had seemed so safe behind their barriers and defensive fleets, were facing the same extinction that Earth had confronted alone. She called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. Commander Jake Morrison arrived first, followed by Admiral Ryan Brooks, Colonel Amy Stevens, and the other leaders who had carried humanity through its darkest hour. "They want our help," Patterson announced without preamble. "The Devourers have reached Harmony Station. The Council is requesting immediate military assistance." The room fell silent. Everyone present remembered the cold dismissal they had received months ago, the casual way the alien leaders had written off entire human worlds as acceptable losses. "What's our response?" asked Brooks, his voice carefully neutral. Patterson looked around the room at the faces of people who had lost friends, family, and entire worlds while fighting alone. She could see the temptation for revenge in their eyes, the desire to let the Council face the same abandonment they had imposed on humanity. "We go," she said simply. "We go because that's who we are." Morrison leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, they left us to die. Why should we risk our people for theirs?" "Because," Patterson replied, "we're not them. We don't abandon people when they need help, even if they abandoned us first." The mobilization was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems began converging on the galactic core. But they weren't alone. The Vanguard fleet, led by War Master Kent, joined the formation. Trader Guild vessels loaded with supplies fell in alongside human warships. Most surprisingly, young rebels from the Council species brought stolen ships to fight against their own government's policies. Dr. Kevin Martinez worked frantically to prepare the largest resonance array network ever conceived. The plan required precise coordination between hundreds of ships from dozens of different species, each one broadcasting electromagnetic frequencies in perfect harmony. "The mathematics are staggering," Martinez explained to engineer Lisa Thompson as they made final adjustments. "One ship out of sync and the entire network fails. We need every species to trust every other species completely." "Can we do it?" Thompson asked. "Honestly, the odds are terrible." "But we've been beating terrible odds since this war started." The combined fleet reached Harmony Station to find chaos. The massive diplomatic center, once the shining symbol of galactic cooperation, was surrounded by devourer swarms. The alien ships moved with deadly precision, their coordinated attacks overwhelming the station's defenses. Admiral Brooks took tactical command of the fleet, coordinating ships and commanders who had never worked together before. The vanguard fought with ancient discipline, their weapons striking with mathematical precision. The Trader Guild vessels, not built for combat, served as mobile supply platforms and communication relays. The human ships darted through the formation like angry wasps, striking where the enemy least expected, but it was the young rebels who provided the key to victory. Crystal Singer of Hope, the young Zephyrian who had joined the coalition, knew the station's defensive systems better than anyone. Working with Lieutenant Nicole Walker, she managed to bring the station's shields back online just as a massive Devourer assault ship prepared to ram the diplomatic chambers. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks," came the transmission across the fleet. "Resonance array activation in 30 seconds. Everyone needs to be in perfect position." Colonel Stevens, commanding a wing of human fighters, led the attack on the Devourer mothership. The enormous vessel was unlike anything they had encountered before. Its hull covered with absorbed technology from a dozen conquered species, it was beautiful and terrifying, a monument to the knowledge and civilizations that had been consumed. "Sarah, take your squadron and clear us a path," Stevens ordered. Sarah Williams, now commanding a mixed unit of human and alien pilots, grinned as she dove toward the enemy ship. Her wingman was a young Chronari pilot who had defected from his species' isolationist policies. Behind them flew Vanguard fighters whose pilots had learned to embrace human unpredictability. The attack was chaos incarnate. Human pilots flew impossible patterns while alien crews provided covering fire with weapons their governments had forbidden them to use. The Devourer defenses, designed to counter organized military assaults, couldn't adapt fast enough to the creative madness of the coalition. "Attack. Resonance array at full power," announced Dr. Martinez from his position aboard the command ship. "All frequencies synchronized. Initiating pulse in 3.do.1." The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the battlefield, thousands of Devourer ships suddenly lost coordination. The beautiful, deadly precision of their attacks dissolved into confusion. Ships began firing on each other, colliding with asteroids, or simply drifting helplessly through space, but this time the humans and their allies were ready. Instead of a desperate defense, they launched the largest coordinated assault in galactic history. Every ship in the Coalition fleet struck simultaneously, their attacks guided by a tactical network that connected human creativity with alien precision. Commander Morrison led the ground assault on the Devourer mothership, fighting alongside Vanguard warriors and rebel aliens through corridors that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. The ship's interior was a nightmare fusion of organic growth and stolen technology. But the assault team pressed forward with grim determination. At the heart of the ship, they found what they were looking for, the central consciousness that coordinated the entire Devourer fleet. It was enormous, a pulsing mass of neural tissue connected to communication arrays from 100 different species. "Tony, you're up," Morrison said to Sergeant Garcia, who was already preparing his charges. "With pleasure, sir," Garcia replied, his grin visible even through his helmet visor. The explosion that followed could be seen from across the system. The Devourer mothership, backbone of their entire invasion force, erupted in a burst of light that outshone the local star. With, their central coordination destroyed, the remaining Devourer forces fell into complete chaos. The battle for Harmony Station was over. The Coalition had won not just a victory, but the war itself. Without their coordinating intelligence, the Devourers were just individual creatures, dangerous but no longer an existential threat to galactic civilization. In the aftermath as rescue. Ships evacuated wounded and engineers began repairs. Admiral Patterson found herself standing once again before the Galactic Council, but this time the roles were reversed. The alien leaders who had once dismissed humanity now looked at her with respect and gratitude. "Admiral," said the Zephyrian Chancellor, his crystal form dim with exhaustion, "we owe you an apology that can never be sufficient. We abandoned you when you needed us most." Patterson nodded slowly. "Yes, you did. But that's not important now. What matters is that we stood together when it counted." The council chamber, damaged by the battle but still functional, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, the young rebels sat alongside. Their former governments and species that had never cooperated before worked together to plan the future. "We propose a new structure for this council," Patterson announced. "One based not on age or technological advancement, but on the willingness to help others when they need it most." The vote was unanimous. Earth would hold a permanent seat on the new council, and the principles of cooperation and mutual aid would be written into galactic law. As Patterson looked out at the assembled delegates, she thought about all the humans who had died in the war and all the aliens who had joined their cause. They had proven that the galaxy's greatest strength wasn't technology or ancient wisdom, but the simple courage to stand with others against impossible odds. Humanity had stood alone when abandoned, but they had taught the galaxy that no one had to stand alone again.